Hi, everybody. So for this segment, I want to expand a little bit on the one book I mentioned in the last little segment that I put out yesterday, and that is Dr. Grogan and Shakeshaft's book on women in educational leadership. So I want to tell you a little bit about why this book blew me away and what were some of the findings in that particular book that really made me rethink how we interpret things, how we examine things. So the first concept is that, you know, we are in social systems. We are, constantly in relationship with one another. And for the last many years, we've taken this very masculine understanding and interpretation of what leadership really is. We've constructed patriarchal systems. And what Grogan and Shakeshaft did was saying, wait a minute, everybody stop for a second here. What if we isolate women in the educational context? And in North America, that needs to be reemphasized. Female leaders in that context. And we see what are some of these social traits, what are some of these characteristics in their leadership. So they isolated and examined female leaders to see if there were some cohesive threads between them. And what they found is that in general, as a pattern, women lead in 5 different ways. So they lead relationally, which means considering the social systems and the relationships within those systems. So the human aspect and trying to, make sure that they see the macro picture. They lead for social justice. A lot of female leaders, in education, they come into the profession because they want to make a difference and they want to improve upon the lives of the students. And they have strongly inherited concepts of fairness for those who struggle and for example, low-income families that we work with in our capacities and so on and so forth. Spiritual leadership, which, it was a very surprising aspect for me. However, one that I could totally relate to, but not so much as a practice of imposing their faith or making sure that they lead through their faith. That was not what it was. It was that women, and especially women of color, as the research and data showed, tend to use their personal faith and their spirituality as a source of personal strength. And so when they are going into unknown situations and when they're faced with big hurdles, it's usually that power to trust themselves or something higher, and it allows them to move into the unknown, which really, again, and I'll come back to this later, but into the metaphor and the creation of Feminine Harbor, the whole idea and concept. A harbor is a place that you come for safety, but eventually you need to let go and go find the new horizon and the new journey. And in order to do that, I don't know one traveler that doesn't resort to trust and faith in something higher in order to take on these journeys into the unknown. So that's what that spiritual context was about. Leadership for learning. Leaders in education tend to really have their heart set on the growth of the students and the learning of the students, and not necessarily the structures. Now, they don't discount the structures, and they don't see the management piece as unimportant. They just don't prioritize it over the growth of the human beings in that system. And balanced leadership, because there are more women and more role models in that industry. Women have then a chance to converse with each other, to talk to one another, and find ways, anecdotally and sometimes, on the sides, just to get ideas and data, human data, on how to balance their personal lives. It's very hard if you're a woman and you're in a environment where there's no other woman to talk to about families, children, pregnancies, miscarriages. So that balanced aspect of, our human lives as women is more prevalent in a system that has other women to kind of, fall back onto. And finally, one of the biggest ideas that I love about this book is that it really taps into the ability to lead in diverse collective leadership. And women in the educational field know very well how to lead in the diverse collective environments, which is something that now all systems around us, because of the internet, because of the social networks, they are pushing us to think that way, collectively, diversely. And so they do have a chapter that covers that. And also it goes beyond gender, how to embrace these traits They say these are traits that we found in female leadership in education, but it doesn't mean that has to stay there. If we can break them down and understand what they are, then these traits become available to anyone, and it goes beyond gender. These are best practices. So these are some of the things that I love about this book, and the bibliography also really takes us back to human paradigms, which is something I'm going to cover on later. But it really has an extensive bibliography, and a lot of it points to human paradigms, which were human compasses from matriarchal cultures on how to behave well as human beings. But more on that later. And I'm sorry I'm over today, but it's one of my favorite books.